Hey everybody, welcome back to the Thousand Words Show. My name is Matt Addington. If you haven't been here before, I appreciate you stopping by and joining me today. Again, I've said it a few times, probably not enough, that this does live at your favorite podcast shop if you just want to listen to it while you're driving or mowing the lawn, or not this year in Minnesota shoveling snow too much because we haven't done it, but it lives in your podcast world, but it also lives on YouTube, on a channel where you get a chance to maybe go in and look at the photos that we are telling the stories about. We'll do our best to describe some of them visually and let you, if you're just listening, paint a picture in your mind. But on YouTube, we will share those back and forth with our guests so you get a chance to see them. On either of those spots, feel free to subscribe and follow and get some notifications when these shows are popping up. It's really been fun to kind of get back into this now, bringing on guests, bringing on friends, and just ultimately like having great conversations about photos and photography and kind of telling the story of all the things, maybe on both sides of that one moment when the shutter clicked, all of the things on both sides I've always found super intriguing. And that's ultimately like what we're trying to do as we visit with friends. Speaking of friends, today I'm super, super excited to have Blake Tollefson on. Blake and I have known each other for several years, primarily through the fishing industry. Blake is a I would say, accomplished angler and accomplished photographer both. And it's really awesome to have Blake on to talk about both of those things today. So Blake, thanks a lot for coming on and joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Matt. This is great.
Yeah, Blake is based in Wisconsin and does magic with the camera. And every time I've been with him, it seems like he's got a fish on the line when we need a fish on the line. So Blake, tell us a little bit about how you got started in photography.
Well, for me, I think it kind of hit me much later in life than it did for most people. I mean, I was probably like in my mid-20s when I really started experimenting with like trying to capture a good photo with my phone. And eventually I got to the point where I was like, I want to take this to kind of that next level. So I bought my first Canon camera, like came with the kit lenses, and then just kept adapting from there.
Yeah. How about, I should have probably prefaced this with like rewind to kind of your passion for fishing in the outdoors. Did that start when you were really young?
Yes, that did. That when I was a kid. I mean, I've been obsessed with fishing for as long as I can remember. Grew up in kind of northern Minnesota. So my dad and I would spend a lot of weekends traveling to a lot of the big walleye lakes. I grew up with a handful of lakes, with a bike right away. So every day I didn't have something going on, I was fishing.
Good. So just tell me a little bit about, you've got what the world would call a real world job. Sometimes people come on and it's like photography is all they do. You have this balance between what the world would call a real job and then kind of this job in the fishing industry with taking pictures. You do a lot of writing, kind of representing through pro staff things. Talk about just the big picture of what your life looks like.
Yeah, so I mean, my day job, so I work in like kind of like land rights. I do like land sales, get easements, deal with encroachments, that kind of thing. So it's really nothing to do with anything really in outdoors. Obviously, I have a love of fishing though, so I've kind of stumbled into some of these different opportunities, and those opportunities have grown into a lot more opportunities. It's definitely a balance. I mean, I have a young family at home as well, so it's trying to keep all of these things together. Can be challenging at times. It's just, you got to know when to say no and when it's okay to say yes, I think is the biggest thing.
For sure. Tell me, you and I have talked in person when we've been on shoots. We've talked off camera here. Talk a little bit about the balance between going fishing and just fishing and having a camera in your hands or a camera sitting, on the side. I really struggle with that when I'm in the field, hunting, fishing, doing things. Do I want to do it because I love doing those things? Do I want to take pictures? Do I want to do the activity? Talk a little bit about maybe how you wrestle back and forth with that when you are out either on the ice or in the boat and your camera's sitting there and you've got maybe a rod in your hand.
It's tough. I mean, for me, like fishing came first. So I feel like my alliances do align with that a little bit more. But there's never a time where I don't bring my camera. I've literally been halfway to a destination and turn around and grab my camera because to me, it's like, I just want to have it in case that shot, that fish, whatever it might be, I got to have it with. So like we kind of talked about before we started here, you got to have the right mindset for what your day is. Like for me, is it going to be a shooting day? Is it going to be a fishing day? I got to have that kind of preset Obviously, if it's a shooting day, like I feel like my pictures, I definitely get better pictures. Overall, maybe I have certain ideas in mind, and that kind of comes to life throughout that process. But there's days I've taken some great shots where I got this cool fish, and like I got to take a picture of it.
That's what I was going to ask you about, crafting the story. If it's a photography day, you might have an assignment from a
Yep,
client, or you've got an article to write or something like that, where you go with something like, I need these things, I need to photograph these things today. Those things for me a lot of times happen a lot more successfully if I've got someone else there that's
100%.
fishing and accomplished. Talk a little bit about how you sometimes it's crafting a story, and it's truly like trying to capture something specific, versus sometimes it's, hey, I'm fishing and God, we got a great fish. And now that I have the fish, or now that this is happening, I want to capture it. Talk a little bit about how you maybe juggle those two things.
Like I said, it's much easier to tell that story when you have somebody there. Like I think back to some different photo shoots I've done. Usually I go in there with a plan, and ultimately the goal is to capture these specific things. And those are some of my favorite photos. But there's those times, like you said, where it's you get that cool fish, or you get something that you want to actually take a picture of, or you want to turn it into something more. For me, in those situations, I really try to think about, if it's a fish related photo, I try to think about the fish first. I think we've all been guilty of it throughout different times of our life, maybe keeping a fish out of the water too long. So like I am super cognizant of that. If it's in the boat, I either leave the fish in the net, put it in the live well. On ice, a lot of times I'll build like an ice live well, especially if I'm fishing for something bigger than like a bluegill or a crappie. Those you can fit into a minnow pail or something for a couple of minutes, but it's nice to have that actual, you want to make sure the fish is going to stay alive is kind of the biggest deal to me.
For sure. I know that people will really resonate with, how to take. I get asked a lot, what's the best way to take photos of your fish when you catch them? And like you said, there's that moment you're dealing with something, living. If it's a photo fish, a lot of times
Yep.
it's a fish you're probably going to want to put back. So you
Yes.
want to have, protecting the fish and keeping it alive, and all of that as a priority. What are some tips that you would give, not only for keeping it alive and doing well, but talk a little bit about poses and fish holds and all of the things that work well for you,
Yep.
that some of our viewers and listeners might take, into the boat or onto the ice with them when they've got a fish that's worthy of a photo.
For sure. Like, obviously, the first thing was make sure you think about the fish. But then after that, like some good tips that I've always found is just to be quick. Have your gear like right next to you. Don't have your camera 100 yards away over on your four-wheeler and you're over here fishing. Like, try to think about that. Some other things are invest in like a good tripod or something you can use. Like I fish by myself a lot, and there are creative ways to get photos. I would say 75 to 80% of the photos I take are of me holding a fish are through a tripod. So there are very creative ways to do that, whether it's through a phone app or
Let me ask
whatever.
real quick before you keep talking about
Yep.
holds and stuff on that front. If you've got the tripod, do you set your camera on just a one shot kind of setting, or what do you do to make sure that you're getting the
High,
shot?
high continuous and just shoot a bunch. And it's what I do anytime I hand, if I'm with somebody who's not familiar with the camera, put on high continuous. I'm like, just make sure it's green and just hold that button down.
Yeah.
So
How about
it's
how about when you're by yourself?
same thing. Yep, I'd rather just take 10 photos and then go back and
Yeah.
sort through them.
Yep.
You know, so I definitely almost always shoot in high continuous in those situations.
Good.
Yep.
All right, keep going. Talk about some holds or some poses or
Yeah.
things that make everybody look good, including the
It's
fish.
yeah. So obviously it's really dependent whether I'm in front of the camera or I'm behind the camera. Like the situations where I'm in front of the camera, I'm really just trying to make sure I can capture that. It's got to be a hand hold that I can do with one hand, because I got to use my other hand to actually take the photo with my phone or remote. So that's one thing there. Big fish, you really got to be cognizant of how you're holding them. I mean, you don't want to be holding them vertically. Definitely try to cradle them two hands. So you have to be a little bit more creative with how you're going to do that if you're by yourself. When other people are, I think it opens up a lot more of that kind of creative side. Like I like stuff really close down to the water, really close to the ice. Like I'm not afraid to get my camera a little bit wet. I don't know. I like the way that those shots look. I think you can do some really creative stuff with those holds close on the water, whether it's like cradling the belly and kind of that release shot. That's kind of my one of my favorite style of shots personally.
Good, good. I think one of the things that I think about a lot with fish photos is you've got the classic grip and grin, which is
Yeah.
ultimately like the person that's got the fish. This is kind of
Yep.
their trophy photo. You and I both shoot with, with gear that's, where, you can shoot really wide open, really fast, real shallow depth of field, which is kind of one of your signature artsy looks too, which I appreciate. But I think a great tip if people do have a really good camera, or even, your iPhone or your cell phone now can do it. You need to be cognizant of that depth of field. A lot of times people will hold the fish. The fish is in focus and the person in the background is not in focus. And do you want both of them to be in focus? I think there's a
Yep.
time and place to, shoot it at 2.8 or
Yep.
1.4 or something where you just really highlight the fish and you can see that there's a person in the background. But for the true like trophy photo that the angler is going to want, you're going to want to probably shoot it at 5.6 or f8 or something where you get their excited look on their
Yes,
face and the fish both in focus.
for sure. I agree with you there.
Yeah, it's some of the photos that you've got. I think that I love most are some of those almost macro type artsy shots where you're shooting. And I remember having the conversation as you were upgrading gear and you were
Yep.
questioning like what lenses to get and all of those things, where you've got a fish that, a crappie sitting by the hole. I'll bring up a couple of your sample, the ones that you shared here, where it's just truly like giving testament to the beauty of the fish. It's not
Yep.
about like, hey, look at this great fish that I caught and grabbing it by the lip and just this like hardcore grip and grin, but truly like the beauty of the fish and the textures. And a lot of times it's the bait and it's sitting by the hole. You've got the photo here I'll pull up of it looked like maybe a rainbow trout that just kind of some of the texture. Was that a rainbow?
Oh, it's a brook trout. Yep.
Brook trout. Okay.
Yep.
Just the beautiful texture that these fish have in their
Yes.
patterns. And, I think sometimes those are, they're not your classic grip and grin that's going to get pinned on the wall at the bait shop. But I think those are that's some of the beauty that you and I both appreciate about fishing.
100%. Yeah, those are like when I think about like what my favorite kind of shots are, it's exactly what you just described. I'd rather capture the fish. I mean, like there's times where I like to have that like it's this trophy crappie that I caught. I want a picture of me holding the fish, but like more times than not, I just want to see the fish. Like I just have an appreciation for especially crappies, especially trout. Like they're just so unique. They're all a little bit different. They have these really cool color patterns to them. Like it's just something to appreciate.
For sure. One of the photos that you shared that I'll just pop up real quick on the screen here to share is the photo. It looks like I'm not sure if it's you in the photo or not because we're talking about shallow depth of field, but
Yep.
the smallmouth looks like a sunset, kind of a hazy sunset.
Yep.
Holding the smallmouth, kind of classic, belly hold, going to be released. Water is literally dripping off, which we always love to get.
For
The
sure.
the tail is just touching the water. There's a little texture on the water. There's a couple water droplets that are popping up underneath where the droplets are hitting the water. Tell us just a little bit about the story leading up to the moment of the click and then afterwards with this beautiful small.
Yeah, so this was a day. So that's actually a sunset, or sorry, a sunrise, not a sunset. It was a day on a drift boat. My friend has a drift boat, so we'll float a lot of the rivers here in central Wisconsin. And it was a day where we started extremely early, and things had kind of started out tough. So when that fish came, it was like, this is one we got to take a picture of. It's been a tough day to start already. There's just something unique about floating a river, especially a stretch river you can't really access with anything other than a drift boat. Smallmouth on the fly are really hard to beat. That was a fly fish, so it was just something that one of those memories I kind of wanted to capture.
For sure. I think one of the really effective things with fish photos, especially, and you nailed it on this one, is the angle, like where you have your camera.
Mm-hmm.
I talk about it a lot in all the places that I photograph and all the subjects, but low angle, right down in the water. Whether that fish was, you know, 22 inches or 14 inches,
Yep.
having that camera down there just adds an element of emotion and just a real energy to it. It's a place that we as humans don't get to look at things a lot. And I think that's one of
Yeah,
the things that makes it super effective.
for sure. I just love those shots. I first started doing it a few years ago, and it's kind of my go-to now. I just like that way that things look from that angle. And it just gives you a different appreciation of the fish, I think.
Yeah. Speaking of angles and places that are not, one of the photos that you shared that I'm going to pull up here is a drone photo overhead that just that kind of classic top down, but really, really big space. I think a lot of times in outdoors photography, you know, fishing or hunting, it's about the animal. It's about how close can you get and how unique can you get? How big is the fish? This being a straight top down of the boat,
Yep.
looks like along maybe some lily pads, kind of a thumb of lily pads that's sticking out from the top left of the photo. Super, super bright green, almost a yellowish green. And then what I love most about this is the glassy reflection of the sky, where you
Me
can
too.
see the reflection of the clouds.
Yep.
The boat happens to be sitting right in a dark area. Perfect top down. Talk a little bit about this photo, where you were, what was happening, but also let's talk a little bit about just drone and all of the things that you're able to do with a drone nowadays.
Yeah, that photo was one of those days where I just brought everything with. And I felt like I was in this, like I had fished for most of the day. And I got to that point and I remember sitting there and thinking, like, I bet this would be a cool drone photo. And so I sent up the drone and I was right. That's a lot of times where my photography stuff happens, is it's just accident. I mean, I'm in the right situation at the right time, the right thing happened, and I'm like, yeah, this would be a good photo.
When you got the drone up there, did you, a lot of times with something like that where there's, you know, there's unique elements involved. And I think with this photo, you have two elements. I mean, three if you include the sky and kind of the background of the lake, but you've got this really cool kind of thumb of weeds or lily pads. It's very strong. And then obviously the focal point being the boat. When you got up there, how much did you rotate the drone, look around, like what's going to be the right composition, or did you just kind of
Yep.
start shooting and then look at it afterwards?
It really depends on the day. That day, I had a thought in mind, and once I could see what it looked like from the sky versus from the water, it had the feeling that I wanted the lily pads to kind of come off of that top left. It just looked cool. Like I have photos of it from other angles as well, and every time I see those photos, I go back to this one as being my favorite of the kind of the.
Yeah. So this can definitely lead into a question that I wanted to ask. Do you have I would say photography and or fishing related harrowing story of epic proportions? I could certainly tell some drone slash fishing stories that I'm sure everybody knows the conclusion to the story, but do you have
Yeah,
anything as you think about your lifetime of fishing and taking photos that would be just a crazy story that happened along the way?
yeah, and it's one of those times where it happened before I had this high quality camera. A friend of mine and I, we went out to Montana to take a big fishing trip. We were there for 7 days. We had 6 days of drift boat fishing. We had one day kind of towards the end where we were able to just go do what we wanted. So we decided that we're going to go wade some rivers, try to catch some trout on our own. And overall, tough day of fishing. Beautiful scenery, like it was just great. But we had a really close encounter with a moose. Like neither of us had ever seen a moose in person, like and not at that distance. So it was like this eerie feeling, like there's this element of fear. And I had set my pack down. This moose is like 50 yards away. I walked across the stream to get my pack, and as I turned around, my buddy snaps a photo with his, I don't know, it's some crappy cell phone picture, but it's a picture that like it's mind blowing. I wish I had it like on a real camera. It's one of those days I'll never forget, because like seeing a moose, like how big they actually are in person is mind blowing,
Yeah.
especially when you're on the ground.
Yeah, I was just gonna say they're a really cool animal when you can look at them from a little ways away or look at them
Yep.
through a 400 millimeter lens, but to be, boots on the ground, kind of in their space,
Yeah.
there's a moment of like, oh, this was cool for a minute, but now I need to think think twice about where I'm at and being safe.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Cool, cool. One other photo that you shared that I'd love to just pull up is the photo. So often in fishing or storytelling for that matter, it's you think, oh, it's got to be about the big fish, and it's got to be this perfect scene out on the water, the perfect sunset. But the photo that I love, because there are 1,000 stories within this photo, is the photo of all of the fishing rods. Kind
Yes.
of a macro shot. It's just all these vertical fishing rods stacked together. Looks like a lot of them are St. Croix, like
Yep.
old
All of them.
classic
All
St.
of
Croix
them are
rods.
St. Croix. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
So,
Tell us the
yeah.
story, man. This is a great
Well,
photo.
I was actually on a photo shoot at St. Croix, and our tour guide, he had saw me taking pictures of some different things around the factory, and he's like, he kind of pulls me aside. He's like, "You got to come check this out." So he opens up this back room, and there is just all of this extremely old St. Croix stuff. St. Croix signs, when they made arrows at one point in time, and then this just rack of rods. And that was basically like kind of like his personal collection that he kept there, and it was just rods from every single era of St. Croix. I mean, there's so much history. I mean, think about the thousands and thousands of fish that those rods have caught. I mean, you could tell looking at those rods that they're old, they've been used. It's not something that's just been sitting in somebody's garage. Like it, when he showed me that rack, I'm like, I gotta get a picture.
That was the thing that struck me most. Aside from it being a really just kind of cool photo as a fisherman looking
Yep.
at that, I immediately started thinking like, think of the stories that any one of these rods
Yeah.
had over the course of time. And the fact that they're really old too, I think kind of lends itself to thinking back to like some of them have got to be 50, 60 years old, and just
Oh,
like
for
what it
sure.
looked like and what those folks like, how hard they had to work for their fish, but at the same time it was still just fishing.
Yep. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
really cool.
very cool. Great photo.
Thank you.
What's a place that you, and maybe kind of two-part question to this, but a place that you would love to go to both fish and take photos that you haven't been, that would just be kind of a bucket list trip for you?
Well, it's a place I've been. I'm going to say Alaska because I've been to Alaska twice, but I've been there without a camera. So, I've got to experience the fishing, like, which is phenomenal and so much fun. But I would like to go back there and do the fishing and photography. Like, there's just so many cool parts about Alaska, the scenery, the fish, like, just all the other animals that live there. And, yeah, I had a cell phone, but it's not the same. Like, I'd like to be able to capture that through a lens too.
Do you tell me a little bit about your experience there without the camera? Like what parts of your trips to Alaska, were there moments where you're like, man, I wish I had my camera or had a better camera? Were there any specific assignments or things, or not assignments,
Yeah,
but things that happened?
yeah. I mean, I think about like heading out on one of the big charter boats. Like you're going out to Target Halibut, and you just see like this backdrop of mountains, and you're like, man, that would be amazing to just have that picture instead of. I mean, it's great to have it in your memory, but it's one of those situations where you'd love to capture it as well. Or just some of the unique fish. Like I remember my brother caught this ginormous king salmon, and yeah, we have some cell phone pictures, but I would love to be able to have captured that on a real camera for him. Like it just things like that are so unique.
Yeah,
You don't get that here.
for sure. Alaska is an incredibly unique and beautiful place. I've been fortunate to be there many times, and I think as I was asking that question, I immediately thought of my first trip up there. Was pre-digital camera days. I was on the Kenai and caught a 56-pound king, and the guide that has now become a good friend of mine, just grabbed his camera and just kind of started snapping pictures. And I
Yep.
ended up, so I've got kind of this old crusty film photo, but it was just kind of your classic grip and grin where I've got this giant salmon. And I think about that now today as I've gone there on assignments and gone there with like taking photos being the real like focus of what I'm doing. I'm like, man, I wish I
Yep.
could go back and redo that day with just the quality gear that I've gotten.
Yeah, same. I have that feeling a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talking about quality gear, what's some of your, we talked a little bit about the drone, we talked about fast lenses. What's maybe your favorite lens or kind of your favorite camera lens setup for doing the things that you do, not only for pleasure, but also for some of the assignments you have?
Yeah, so 24 to 70 f2.8 is what I use almost 100% of the time. Like it's a super versatile lens. I can get really close stuff with it, and I can do some somewhat further stuff with it as well. But a lot of the stuff I do is pretty up close and personal, so I like that. Obviously, I have some other more macro lenses, but that 24 to 70 barely ever leaves my camera.
For fishing, that's the absolute most
Yep.
versatile lens. I mean, you're never unless you're looking at a moose across a lake and you want
Yep.
something that's really tight. That 24 to 70 gives you a little bit of everything
It
that
does.
you would need kind of in a boat, on the ice, all of those types of things for sure.
Yep.
Do you have a preference between open water or hard water, ice fishing versus open water? Do you like one more than the other, or if you could only just target one type of fishing, what would it be?
That's a very tough question. I love ice fishing, but I think I'm gonna say open water most of the time. The windy days are the days where I like, because you can hunker down in an ice shack. You can only fish when waves are so high. Um, but I do prefer open water fishing. It'd be a little more challenging at times, I feel like, to get good photos. It's almost easier when it's cold, as long as it's not super cold in terms of photos for ice fishing. But it's something about being in a boat. I love it. Everything's right there. I'm not coming home thawing all my stuff out. I'm not worried about my camera getting too cold. Like it's all right there. I just like that aspect of it.
The ice fishing is great from a gear standpoint in that you can set things down, you can move around,
Yes.
even if you need, light stands or more production kind of stuff. But man, like fighting the cold, just
Yeah.
cold fingers, cold gear, cold batteries, all of those things, it's such a grind sometimes.
Yeah. It is. It is. Yeah. It's fun. I mean, I feel like some of my favorite photos I've ever taken have come from on the ice. I think there's a lot of times there's a little more character with things, especially like that up close stuff on ice than there is with open water. But if I had to pick, I'm still taking open water.
I think one of the things that I love about shooting on the ice too is your ability as the photographer to move around and get,
Yep.
sometimes where you can walk 150 yards away and shoot something where if you were in a boat, you'd have to have a chase boat to be able to shoot stuff like that. You have a little bit
100%.
more flexibility, you know, in being able to work with different compositions. And I mean, walk
Yes.
right up to the fisherman if you need to, walk away, change angles, get all the way around on different sides. Whereas if you're in a boat, like you're a little bit locked down. Now, I'm not complaining about that because I love both of them too, but I think ice does give you that unique ability to move around and create more
Yep.
composition.
For sure. Yeah. I think about like how many times I've been laying down on the ice to get a shot. You can't really do that in a boat or laying on your back and shooting up, like just different things that you wouldn't be able to do as easily in a boat.
Yeah. One question I like to ask folks: do you have a piece of photography gear or fishing gear for under $100 that you would not go into the field or onto a lake without?
I'll give you one of each. So for a camera, for sure an extra battery. That has saved my butt so many times, especially on ice, because if you don't keep those batteries warm, they don't always function the way they should. So I would say an extra battery. And then for just fishing, it'd be a headlamp. Like that has also saved my butt many a times. So it doesn't matter what gear you have, as long if you have a good headlamp, it can pay dividends.
For sure. Those are both great suggestions. Love it, love it. Where are some of the places that we can find you? tell us your Instagram, but also talk a little bit about some of your writing assignments and
Yeah,
places that we can find articles and pieces that you're working on.
for sure. So obviously, he said social media. It's at B Tollefson Fishing on Instagram. Just Blake Tollefson on Facebook. Do have a website that I highlight most of that stuff too. Beyond that, like all the writing stuff, I writing for Midwest Outdoors, Outdoor News, pretty much every month, and then I'm doing a lot of online blogs for a couple of different companies as well.
Awesome.
Yep.
Well, it's great chatting with you.
Yeah, for sure.
Every time we've been able to be out, on the lake or on the water together has been enjoyable. I hope we get to do that soon, but it was great
Me too.
catch up here and hear some of someone else's perspective on fishing, both hard water and open water. So many people ask me all the time for tips and things, and to hear some of the things that you've done to be successful and to see, some of your beautiful work and just the stuff that you've kind of progressed with as you've taken photography to kind of the next level to accompany the things that you do. I really appreciate you coming on today.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me, Matt, and I just want to say thanks to you. You've helped me a lot throughout my kind of photography career. You've been always there to answer questions, to, this is the right thing to get here for this scenario, so I really appreciate that.
Yeah, well, it's a little tiny bit of advice from me has gone a long ways for you with the way you've taken it and just really gone to like I said, to the next level with your photos. I think there's a definite style there that as I scroll social media or things pop up, it's got a definite Blake Tollefson feel to it. So
it's good.
You've got a real knack for capturing just the beauty of the fishing and the things that a lot of people like us love to do. So thanks again for joining us, and that's going to do it for this episode of 1,000 Words. I again appreciate my friend Blake Tollefson coming on to talk fishing and photography and being really good at both, which he is one of the best. And join us again next time on the 1,000 Words show. But thanks for joining us here today for sure.